This podcast is brought to you by Progressive. Are you driving your car or doing laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity, like Progressive home and auto policies. They're best when bundled too. Having these two policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. Quote a home and car bundle today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary.
Hey, drag fans, please listen up.
I'm Alaska.
And my name is Willem.
And we are the hosts of Race
Chaser,
the premier and preeminent RuPaul's Drag Race recap podcast. And if you aren't listening to this podcasting behemoth yet, start right now.
Because it's 2023 and we have weekly coverage of the all-new episodes from the season 15 of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Every Wednesday, we will discuss, dissect, and disseminate all of the juiciest moments, wildest runway looks, and the shadiest reality TV twists of the best show on television, Drag Race.
Race Chaser with Alaska and Willem is the ultimate backstage pass for both drag obsessives and new fans alike. So don't wait. Find us on your podcast apps and listen.
Check out new episodes of Race Chaser every Wednesday and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you.
This podcast contains explicit language. If you want to know how explicit, keep listening. Hi, I'm Josh Levin, and this is Hang Up and Listen for the week of May 8th, 2023. On this week's show, we'll discuss the latest on the NBA playoffs, where the conference semis are tight, James Harden is either great or terrible, and perennial MVP candidates are lightly shoving owners. We'll also talk about the latest sports gambling scandal in which Alabama's baseball coach got fired for, well, we're not exactly sure, but it sounds bad. And finally, Bronny James is going to USC. We'll assess the Trojans' possible 9-man rotations. Fine, we'll just talk about Bronny James. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm the author of The Queen and the host of the podcast 1 Year. Stefan Fatsis is off scrabbling this week, and Joel Anderson is slowly burning. Do not forget, Season 8, Becoming Justice Thomas, coming May 31st. With me for the whole show, my Slate colleague, Ben Mathis-Lilley. He's the author of The Hot Seat, A Year of Outrage, Pride, and Occasional Games of Football. And if I were a betting man, I'd put the over-under on Michigan references in this podcast at 3.5. Ben, welcome.
I always like to tell you guys that I want to demonstrate my range talking about things besides Michigan, but you're coming pretty close in a couple of the segments here. So I think that it might slip in.
Also with us is Jack Hamilton. He's covering the NBA playoffs for Slate. He is Slate's pop critic, the author of Just Around Midnight, Rock and Roll and the Racial Imagination, and a professor of media studies and American studies at the University of Virginia. If you'd like to ask him why you got an F on your final paper, maybe you should just ask ChatGPT, since you thought it was such a good idea when you got the assignment. Jack, hello.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. I'm excited to do the whole show this time.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. In our Slate Plus segment, we're going to talk some more NBA, including a close examination of the up and down current playoffs and career of one James Harden, now of the Philadelphia 76ers. To hear us discuss, you need to be a Slate Plus member. You get bonus segments on this show. You get bonus segments on other shows. You get ad-free shows. You get to support us. It's a good thing to do. Slate.com/hangupplus to sign up. That's slate.com/hangupplus. On Sunday night in Phoenix, the Suns tied up their Western Conference semis series with the Nuggets 2-2 with a 129-124 win. Phoenix was led with 36 points from Kevin Durant and another 36 from Devin Booker, who has somehow shot 34 for 43 from the field in the last two games, missing about as many shots in those two games collectively as Jason Tatum missed in a row in the first half of the Celtics' loss to the Sixers on Sunday. But back to Phoenix, Nikola Jokic, who scored 53 for the Nuggets in the loss with 11 assists, got in a small and strange tiff with new Suns owner Matt Ishbia. After a scramble, the ball went out of bounds, and Ishbia, a former walk-on guard at Michigan State, held onto it, showing major walk-on energy, preventing the Nuggets from going on a potential fast break. When Jokic tried to grab the ball away, he ended up lightly shoving Ishbia with his arm, and Ishbia flopped down into his seat, looking more like a Coach K disciple than a Tom Izzo protege. Jack, Jokic got a technical but was not ejected. At the time we're recording this on Monday morning, it's unclear whether the league will suspend him, though apparently just as we are taping this segment, Ishbia has tweeted his thoughts on that. So what did Ishbia say, and what can we do to remove the scourge of owners flopping from this game?
Yeah, so Matt Ishbia recently tweeted that he does not think that Nikola Jokic should be suspended for Game 5, which I don't know is probably the right move if you're the Suns' new owner. It's interesting how much Matt Ishbia has really put his stamp on this season. You know, he bought the Suns near the beginning of this calendar year and has since traded for Kevin Durant. Had a number of spicy podcast appearances and is now.
I don't know about these spicy podcast appearances. What did he say on the podcast?
He went on Bill Simmons's podcast, I believe, last week and spoke surprisingly openly about his ongoing feud with Cleveland Cavaliers owner Dan Gilbert, who's also a Michigan State alum and is also a mortgage impresario. And I guess there's no love lost between them. Gilbert apparently was the only owner who did not vote to approve Ishbia's purchase of the Suns. He, I believe, abstained pointedly. So it introduces, kind of a interesting wrinkle. But yeah, there was something weird about the interaction between Ishbia and Jokic. Jokic probably shouldn't have reacted as brusquely as he did, but at the same time, it did feel a little bit. It gave me flashbacks to like early years of Mark Cuban, where he was just a little bit too eager, a little too involved, a little too many Mark Cuban moments in those first 5-10 years of the Dallas ownership. And obviously, Cuban's still not immune to those moments, as we saw earlier. A few months ago. But yeah, it was, I don't know, it was an interesting dust up, and Matt Ishbia seems like a character who, will probably be entertaining for the NBA and also probably kind of annoying for them at some points as well.
It's a weird thing that sports fans do, is that we sympathize with the commissioners of the leagues. But that was my first reaction, was to sympathize with Adam Silver, a person who does not need my sympathy or really anyone's sympathy. But the fact that he clearly has on his hands not only, for those who have not read up on Matt Ishbia, there was a Bloomberg story about complaints of at his mortgage company, former employees saying that there was kind of like a locker room atmosphere in the workplace, which is something that the Phoenix Suns thought they were just getting rid of by pushing out Robert Sarver, the previous owner, who had been accused pretty credibly, pretty thoroughly of creating a hostile, racially and sexually hostile workplace at the actual, Phoenix Suns office. So it's like Adam Silver is getting this new guy in to turn a corner, and not only does he have this Bloomberg article floating out there, like the guy is pulling Mark Cuban moves like right in the front row, and it's like you got your two like biggest headaches as a commissioner combined into one guy, and you're stuck with this dude for a long time probably.
The Ishbia-Gilbert Michigan State mortgage rivalry, it's just going to be up there, right, with like Bird and Magic and NBA annals. I love it. But I think in soccer, they call this shithousery. It's like when somebody gets fouled and there's a free kick and the player on the other team just kicks the ball away so they can't take it quickly. I actually give him credit for the basketball acumen that he showed and just holding on to the ball. But I did mean when I said major walk-on energy, and you nailed it, Jack, with the Cuban comparison. There is a little bit of, I'm excited to be an NBA owner, and I'm going to be in the front row. I mean, Steve Ballmer can't really be compared with anyone in terms of his aggressive fandom moments. But, this guy does seem like he's going to be someone that we're perhaps a little bit too well acquainted with in coming years.
I'm going to just break into it right away. When I wrote my book about Michigan football,
ding, ding.
I went to a game at Michigan State at Spartan Stadium in East Lansing, and it happened to be a game where Matt Ishbia was being honored for giving some large sum of money to the university or to the athletic program. This is actually before he put up tens of millions of dollars for Mel Tucker. There's a football coach at Michigan State. Michigan State won that game, and largely because they won that game, Mel Tucker has this $90 million contract, which Matt Ishbia is paying part of, but not all of. But so this was even before this. He'd already given some other enormous sum of money, and they played like a Matt Ishbia highlight reel on the Jumbotron, but there's like only one play on it because he was a walk. He made a layup, so he made a layup, which is I think this is strongly suggestive that he does in fact think of himself as a jock, as a part of the culture. I feel like a donor at that level is aware.
This reminds me of the Grizzlies owner playing in the NBA celebrity game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
at All-Star weekend. I think that should be banned. That's when I become commissioner. That's my first move. But Jack, you wrote about KD last week, and with your incredible basketball acumen, just as you had written the obit for the Warriors before they turned it around against the Kings, you're like, they're down 2-0, 538 says there's an 87%. Anyway, the series is now tied 2-2. But the issues you raised in that story about kind of what KD's role is on this team and where he is in his career are still very much live ones. And watching these last couple of games, I mean, Devin Booker has been just absolutely incandescent. And I think kind of similar to Jimmy Butler is making the game look way, way easier than it is at this stage. And Durant was way better in game 4 than he had been earlier. But sort of how are you seeing this team kind of come together, which was kind of everyone's favorite going into these playoffs to come out of the West?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's such an interesting story to watch unfold. Particularly just Devin Booker ascending to these heights that, Devin Booker's been really good for a long time, but he's really playing maybe the best player in basketball at the moment. I still think that the Phoenix Suns have a lot of problems. I would frankly be really surprised if they ended up winning this series, in part because they don't have home court advantage and the Nuggets play really, really well at home. Just the fact that the Nuggets play them pretty close. Play them very close in game 4, certainly. I still think the advantage is with Denver, in part because the problems that Phoenix have, they're really shallow. They need huge games from basically Booker and Durant every single time out to win, which they got in games 3 and 4. I think I saw that in game 3 they combined for 86 or 87 points or something, and last night it was something crazy like that as well. Yeah, and I just don't know that you're going to be able to get that every night. But I've long been fascinated by Kevin Durant. This is someone whose career I've been following really since he was in college, because actually the year that he came out was the year that the Celtics were tanking for the number 1 pick. It was the Durant-Oden year in 2007. So I was sort of lusting after Kevin Durant as a skinny college kid in Texas when the Celtics were losing 19 games in a row or whatever it was that season. And yeah, he's just had it's had a really interesting star-crossed, bizarre career. And in a weird way, this postseason is almost an extension of that, because it's he goes to Phoenix after all these other stops, and he's kind of on this ongoing quest to win a title. He won 2 titles, obviously, with the Golden State Warriors, but I think a lot of people feel like, and it seems like in some ways he feels like those have sort of an asterisk on them because he joined this team that was already great, that had already won a championship, maybe was more Steph and Clay's team per se. And now he's gone to this Phoenix team, which, who knows, maybe the Suns will pull it together and win a championship this year. I think it's unlikely. But if they were to do that, like the way it's looking right now is it's going to be Devin Booker's team. So it's going to once again be a situation where Kevin Durant has gone somewhere and ends up, in a sidekick role, essentially. And I mean, this guy is one of the most talented basketball players we've ever seen, who's going to finish with, one of the, a truly great historic career. And it's just a really odd set of stops that KD has had on the course of his career.
Yeah. And it's funny, like the mercenary claim about him was made for a particular reason in Golden State because they had already won before he got there. And this time, Ben, it feels like he's a mercenary because for a lot of us, like watching him in these playoffs, it's maybe the first time we've actually seen him in a Phoenix jersey. They were saying in the game last night that this was his 17th game ever playing for this team. So it just feels bizarre to watch a guy try to win a championship and have like a reasonable chance to do it on a team that he's like barely ever played for.
Yeah, I think when you watch the team, it's pretty evident, right? It looks like kind of like four guys passing the ball around the outside, and then I mean, it works quite a bit because two of those guys are like some of the best offensive players in history. Just watching from afar, I kind of wonder if this the way the Western Conference playoffs are going, with the Clippers having been eliminated already and the Suns having these struggles, like are we going to see like maybe like a little bit of a pulling back from the model of like just trying to get the best player to play isolation basketball like at all costs? That said, it seems it's working right now for the Lakers, like putting together a team with essentially a month left in the season. It's working well for them. But I had the same thought about KD when I was watching that I did about LeBron. Is just that I'm not sure I can remember an example of someone who's in the conversation for the top 10, or as Jack noted, it's always top 12 with Durant. It's like saying top 10 does feel a little too strong. So you get those extra two spots in there. You see LeBron deferring to Davis and even deferring to like D'Angelo Russell, and you see and Kevin Durant, passing the ball to Devin Booker, and those are the right plays. But I can't remember another example of someone with guys with those kind of reputations playing this way in such important games. And it's, I guess, a testament to their longevity, you might say. But it does, as you were noting, just throw another wrench into the problem of evaluating exactly how good Kevin Durant is.
So, you mentioned the depth, Jack, and this is always an issue with acquiring someone of Durant's talents. Like, it would be really great if they had Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson at the moment. And the reason that they won that game 4, in large part, was because Landry Shamet made a whole bunch of three-pointers in the fourth quarter. And so, yeah, they're going to need big games, especially with Chris Paul out for now. They're going to need big games from Durant and Booker every game. But, Booker didn't really shoot that much in the fourth quarter. They were doubling him and, swing the ball. And Landry Shamet's open, and he happened to make them in this game. And, I mean, that's the thing that's been so fascinating about the Lakers managed to actually acquire a bunch of depth without having to trade away much at the deadline. That's certainly helped them. And then you have a team like the Heat who, they've got Jimmy Butler and Bam, but they've lost Tyler Hero. They've lost Victor Oladipo. And they just have a bunch of random guys, seemingly random guys who just are better or seem better than the random guys on a lot of other NBA teams, and it's made them very difficult to beat. Like with their second unit led by Kyle Lowry, they're extending leads rather than a lot of these games we're watching when, whether it's Durant or Booker or Jokic in this series, those teams tend to crumble.
Yeah, we got very random guys in there. I believe their names are Caleb and Gabe, which I think are among the most random first names that you can have. And I think with Denver's got a Bruce, and they're succeeding with that. So I think that there might be a lesson there in terms of the kind of talent, like the lower level talent that you're trying to acquire and develop for some of the other teams.
I mean, Phoenix has a guy who's literally named Jock, which they're trying to get to work for them, but we're not fooled.
Yeah, it's interesting. In a way, it's. I think like what Ben is saying is absolutely right, and it does point at the fact that it's like, yeah, it's great to have stars, but a really, really important key to building, a team that can win 4 rounds in the playoffs is like being able to get, to hit on guys who are like the Heat have done, just pull guys who like weren't drafted, who are like playing overseas or playing in the G League, and, finding these little gems who can come in and give you, 15 minutes here and there. And it's really interesting because it's like, yeah, that's really what Phoenix is missing. Like the Phoenix has a lot of issues with depth. And yeah, like you said, Landry Shamet, really showed up yesterday, but like they're really missing, particularly defensively, some of the guys, someone like Bridges, who they gave up in the Durant trade. It's kind of a similar situation to what happened with Brooklyn, where it was like Brooklyn had, for a period had Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, and then Harden leaves, they bring in Ben Simmons, who never really gets going. And then, Brooklyn's problem in last year's playoffs was basically very similar, which was that you had Durant and Kyrie, and then it was like, okay, what's going to be next? Who is like, how are we going to get stops? Like, how are we going to, get guys to score who, when teams are, know how to defend our 2 best players, and they got swept in that first round series. Obviously Phoenix is faring a lot better, but yeah, that's why if I were Phoenix, the prospect of, even if they get past Denver, the prospect of playing a team like the Lakers in the next round, I think would kind of scare me, because LA is really good defensively.
The team that they're maybe most similar to on the total downside, like floor, would be the Mavericks, who, in getting Kyrie, traded away like all of their good wing players and then didn't even make the play-in.
I think an interesting thing about it is that probably we're not talking about vast talent differences between guys like Gabe Vincent or someone on the Suns like, let's say, Terrence Ross or Ish Wainwright, right? Like, it's not like the Heat's guys are way better than Phoenix's guys. It's just a matter of like having arranged the roster a few years ago and given it enough time to stick and, get these guys into a position where they actually know what to do, which is like not probably what we thought we'd be talking about as the big difference between like the successful teams and the less successful ones in the NBA playoffs, just because basketball is a stars game and we're living in a stars league. But it actually seems like what's playing out so far is that like teams like Denver have just gone a little longer with their glue guys who, the guys know how to play off Jokic and off Jamal Murray in a way that the guys on Phoenix and, the guys on the Clippers didn't know how to do.
We'll love to hear you defend that take when the Lakers win the title in June behind Rui Hachimura.
Yeah.
So we will wrap up here and we'll talk about James Harden, the Sixers, and the Celtics in our bonus segment. But up next, Alabama baseball coach gets fired in a gambling scandal. That seems bad. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed. And that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. Indeed streamlines hiring with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. With Instant Match, more than 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed Data US. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/hangup. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/hangup. Indeed.com/hangup. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the credit card created by Apple. It gives you unlimited daily cash back that you can now choose to grow in a high-yield savings account at 4.15% annual percentage yield. That's more than 10 times higher than the national average savings rate. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. National average savings rate is from FDIC website. Terms apply. On April 28th, number 1 LSU beat Alabama 8-6 in a college baseball game that few people outside of those particular fan bases knew about or paid any attention to. But a little less than a week later, that game would make national news when Alabama head coach Brad Bohannon got fired after an investigation on bets that were placed on Bohannon's team to lose. The Tide's best starting pitcher, Luke Holman, was pulled from the lineup with a back injury not long before the first pitch. And according to ESPN, surveillance video from a sportsbook in Cincinnati indicated that a person who made bets against Alabama was on the phone with Bohannon, the manager, as he made the bets. Ben, we are still waiting for more details on what exactly was transpiring on the phone. But even Pete Rose is saying, that seems bad.
He made it a little too obvious, right? I think that Pete was pretty immersed in the gambling world and probably would have known the right guys to obscure what was happening a little bit more. Because as we've discovered from subsequent reporting, although as you note there hasn't been a ton of it, I think FanDuel said they took no bets on this game, and generally online apps don't allow you to bet any more than $500. So the mere existence of a large bet on a college baseball game was itself enough to trigger these kind of tripwires that are apparently being put out by a company called US Integrity that flagged this. I have to say, as a non-sports gambler, I actually kind of want to applaud this guy for having an actionable piece of intelligence with which to bet on a game. I mean, to me, like this, the entirety of sports gambling is just like gradually losing your money, like every 4% at a time, right? Because you don't know any more than the people setting the lines in Las Vegas. And this guy did, like to me, that's what it should be all about.
You gotta hand it to him.
Yeah.
Jack.
I mean, he knew where the market was going.
Well, I do think that in making a bad point, you also kind of make a good point, which is that in a lot of times, the place where there is actually money to be made is in sports that don't get a lot of attention. I remember there was some story, I might be botching some of this, but like somebody made a killing because Vegas just like set the WNBA over-under totals really badly just because the bookmakers weren't paying that close attention. And somebody who had like a WNBA over-under analytical model was just like, wow, they really botched that. And so in a case where, maybe Vegas isn't paying attention to the money line for a college baseball game, there could potentially be money to be made there.
I think that's how Haralabos Vulgaris, am I pronouncing Haralabob's name correctly?
Yeah. Haralabob, yeah.
Bob Vulgaris.
Yeah. Sometimes Dallas Mavericks consultant and ESPN podcast guest. I believe his entree into the world of NBA gambling was that he realized that they didn't update like the totals at halftime. So like if it was a low, like they would just divide the over under for the game by 2, and then they wouldn't adjust, so the second half was just the first one divided by 2, and they wouldn't adjust it, which is, to me, again, as not a sports gambling enthusiast, like the fact that is what you have to, like, the kind of thing you have to be interested in to actually make it like a large money. It just doesn't seem that glamorous to me. I'm not excited by it. I'm sorry to all of our, the numbers would seem to suggest that our readers are enthusiasts, that everyone is more into it than I am, but I don't see it. I don't see it.
Apologies to our sponsor, DraftKings.
They are not our sponsor this week. Jack, one of the aspects of the story that I think can help us zoom out here is that the sports book where this phone call was received in Cincinnati was in Great American Ballpark, the Cincinnati Reds baseball stadium. And that is a thing that is happening increasingly, that stadiums in all sports all around the country have taken these gambling operations in-house. And it is just such a dramatic shift, I think, from, all of us were about the same age from when we were growing up. And it was all about, from the NFL, and Pete Rose with baseball as well, but gambling was this horrible scourge, and if we're associated with it at all, it's going to taint our games forever, and it's just not at all worth the risk. And the NFL, which just suspended 5 players, 3 of them indefinitely for at least a full season for gambling-related offenses, has made this decision, this bargain, that whatever the consequences are, whatever the damage is to the game or to the reputation of the sport or its integrity, it's worth it because of the amount of revenue that this brings in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really something that, it's an obvious observation, but, it talks, it speaks to the, flexibility of moralism under capitalism, I guess, where when moralism and capitalism run up against each other, capitalism's often going to win. As you were saying, Josh, when we were growing up, gambling was like a total third rail for professional sports leagues. It was something that, the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball, tried to keep it such arm's length and just you would never talk about it. And the quickness with which that has changed has been truly, just it's dizzying. And it's really weird. And it's definitely something that I've been wondering when the first time is that we're going to see like a really major scandal happen with this, because it doesn't seem like something it seems like something that the leagues have jumped into, both feet first and just kind of closed their eyes and been like, this is probably going to, hope it's going to work out. This Alabama thing, maybe this is the first, it seems really bad, and the fact that it's college sports, I think makes it kind of even grosser. The fact that, this is probably most of the athletes who are competing in this game for Alabama aren't probably making very much money. Maybe some of them have NIL deals, but a lot of them probably don't. They're probably there playing without compensation, hoping to get noticed by scouts. And their coaches, maybe throwing games. And it's just sort of, it's really, really grotesque. And it does seem like something that's so, it also, as you and Ben were alluding to, it seems so flagrant in this case. I don't think we even mentioned the fact that this was after he had scratched the team's starting pitcher for Alabama. This was like, and was starting someone. I don't
think there's any suggestion that he pulled the guy from the game to win money. We don't know. We don't know, but it seems like what happened most likely is that the pitcher had a legitimate injury, and before the line could move, he told somebody hey, our best pitcher isn't gonna pitch.
Josh carrying water here for the Bohannon defense.
What Jack is suggesting is that the manager hit the pitcher with a baseball bat in the back, and that's why he had to get scratched.
Well, that's not totally. Who knows? But so this is one of the problems is that it's who knows? But one thing I think we can say is that this guy did bet against the player that he named this pitcher's replacement.
Right. Yeah, that guy
not
comes
exactly
out,
a vote of confidence.
Yeah, that other guy comes out, he's throwing heat, and the manager's like, "Oh shit."
It's like, and how's he going to manage if, for some reason this kid's pitching the game of his, if this kid's taking a no-hitter into the, sixth inning or something, is he going to, suddenly hit a suspiciously low pitch count or something?
Well, I also think if you one of the other reports with Darvin Rovell was that the guy he called was identified as a former high school. Like, if you're the manager of the Alabama baseball team and you know that you're going to call a guy, you have a specific guy you're going to call to place a bet in the Great American Ballpark Sports, it's probably not your first experience with sports gambling, right? So I think when Jack is alluding to is I think that this does raise, there's reason to be concerned about what the decisions he might have been making prior to this incident as well.
And you also make a good point that this, if it's not a kind of the first of a series of many stories like this that we'll see, it is at the very least the example of what someone on the inside could do with information that only they would have. That's why the leagues all have these rules around how you report injuries, when you have to report injuries, and just whether it's a trainer, a coach, a fellow player, all these guys do have information that they could probably use to win money gambling. It's hard to argue against that.
Yeah, and I think, so for those who are not aware, my day job at Slate is writing about politics. So part of covering politics is covering political scandals and trying to figure out when a scandal is actually, when is someone actually going to resign over a scandal versus when they're going to wait it out. And I think what I've come to conclude after a few years of doing this is it's not about the underlying moral issue, as Jack alludes to. It's about what volume of publicity, bad publicity, or just distracting publicity, does a certain institution or person want to put up with? And I do think we see the potential here for if enough of these things happen, I think the leagues might be drawing back. Might draw back from their associations with the gambling companies and the gambling apps, not because they've decided it's the right thing to do, but because they're just sick of answering questions about it. There were so many. I mean, the Detroit Lions had a few players suspended for placing bets in the parking lot of the team facility, and I don't think that that's a major blow to the integrity of the sport, but it does seem like the kind of thing that might keep happening. And I think at some point they might just want to stop answering questions about this stuff more so than they've come to believe that, Roger Goodell comes to believe in his heart that he's made a mistake or whatever.
Well, the New York Times had a good piece on this where they made the point that the NFL and this, so many other things, put out statements that reveal nothing and are intended to say we have it under control and we're actually not going to tell you what happened, but don't worry, it's not a big deal. And they also collected these amazing quotes from years past, like Paul Tagliabue testifying to Congress in 1991, we should not gamble with our children's heroes. And Goodell saying he was against it before he was for it, saying the NFL cannot be compensated in damages for the harm that sports gambling poses to the goodwill, character, and integrity of NFL football.
It's literally beyond putting a price on. It's like a Russian Fabergé egg from you simply cannot. I think actually what Tagliabue, when he completed that sentence, is his, we should not gamble with our children's heroes unless we have crossed outside the Detroit. Once we've left the Detroit Lions parking lot, then we can commence such activities. It's phenomenal. As you were saying, the speed with which they've reversed themselves, with basically not feeling any obligation at all to explain. We didn't even get a show of here's how we figured out how we're going to do it the right way. It was just one year we didn't have these ads, and the next year we have 15 of them in every game.
Yeah, I would just add too, Ben mentioned his day job. My day job is as a college professor, and it's truly disturbing the extent to which this stuff has really permeated college campuses and college sports. The New York Times has been doing a lot of reporting on this that you guys have probably read. I honestly haven't encountered it all that much personally at the University of Virginia, but I'm sure it's there, and I just am not exposed to it. But yeah, the amount, the level to which these gambling apps are being marketed aggressively to college students and, being encouraged, college students being encouraged to, implicitly or explicitly encouraged to wager on their school, and, play these games. And, there's certainly a number of states where the age for gambling is only 18. It's really the implications to this are really, really dark. And especially when you think about, the lip service that's paid to like athletes just being part of a student community. They're students like everyone else. It's like you're creating a situation where, you've got, undergraduates who are, hypothetically betting on the person who's sitting next to them in English class or something like that.
Part of the campus community. It just brings everyone closer together.
Yeah, it's like the possibilities for corruption, for all these different things, for temptations. I mean, these are really young kids, or they're very, very young adults who, they're like college kids. I think everyone would agree don't have like the best judgment all the time. And it's also just something where it's like, gambling. I'm not a moralist about gambling. I don't have any problem with gambling being legal, but I mean, I think most people would agree that like gambling is something that's addictive, that is potentially really bad for you, that can lead to, lots of bad places. And I think that like introducing this to a population of people who are already, inclined to maybe do things that aren't great for them. Like, I don't know. I guess one thing I've been thinking about is like, there's been a lot of discussion recently and over the years about college sports and like whether college sports are, good for student athletes or good for institutions. And I think this is opening up something where you're like, man, like, are we going to have to start having conversations about like, are college sports good for college students? If they're becoming this sort of thing where you're just like, it's a casino that kids are taking part in, every Saturday or, every Tuesday and Thursday or whatever, whenever people are betting on games. I don't know. Sorry if that's a soapbox, but it's like, that's just really, it gets so disturbing so fast the more I think about the various implications of it.
I think everything you're saying is true about the potential for addictiveness. Something I've found in talking to people who use these apps, like my neighbors, the younger people I happen to interact with on the very rare occasions when I interact with a younger person, it's been incorporated into many people's lives in a way that I'm not trying to apologize for the big gambling companies here, but like it can be fair, it can be somewhat benign. Like I think, as with any vice, in moderation, like there are people, who manage $50, a $50 balance or $100 on their app and kind of see it as just like having a little bit of money in a video game system, which I think is something that the apps are encouraging, right? Like to kind of make it just a little bit like paying 50 cents in a video game. Which I think is where we're running into some of these problems, right? Like if you are capable of managing it in this way that it's not dysfunctional and you are an athlete, like why would you have any of the dark associations with it that would lead you to believe that it's a problem to bet on another sport altogether when you're in your car? I think, so I think that goes back to like the speed with which the leagues, shifted their tone on this, is like, leading to some problems for them, and not just in the, as far as like contradiction of principles, but like their messaging to their own fans, to their own players has been kind of muddled, and it is a little confusing, like why this is supposed to be benign in one context and why it's actually the worst thing you could possibly do in another.
Yeah, I mean, there was a Virginia Tech linebacker who self-reported that he'd bet on the NBA Finals, so not college sports, not even his same sport, and was suspended for 6 games. And so you have this dichotomy. You have things like what the Alabama manager did, where like, obviously that's like really terrible and should not be allowed, and the guy should have been fired. And then you have a case where, whether it's the NCAA or the NFL, taking an incredibly hard line when they themselves have blurred the line beyond even blurriness. The line basically doesn't even exist anymore. And kind of taking it out on these athletes who are absorbing the message that they themselves are sending out to the world, which is that this is great and harmless and do it and it's fun. And then, it's always been weird. I don't know if it's something that you guys thought about when you were growing up. I can't say it's something that I was necessarily super conscious of, but it's always been weird that you can bet on college sports. Given, and especially with social media now, there's the story about a TCU player who had a quote unquote meaningless shot in the NCAA tournament to cover the spread against Gonzaga and gets all of these like horrible messages on social media, which I follow tennis, and tennis players are often just besieged with like hateful messages by gamblers. And I'm sure every athlete is, but you're being besieged by these messages when you're a college student. And when, again, maybe you have an NIL deal, but you don't get a salary that in some way, I mean, nobody deserves this kind of abuse, but in some ways, if you're a professional, it's like part of I don't want to say that it's part of the deal, but at least you're getting paid. You know what I mean? And in this case, it's a guy who's a college student who gets these messages. And so we already have, even before this like spread of legalized gambling, it was already always weird and bad in some ways that you could bet on these guys who weren't getting paid themselves. And now with these like network effects of social media and with, like you were saying, Jack, a kid next to you in class can bet on you and can be mad at you if you don't, if his bet doesn't pay off. It just leads to all sorts of additional problems. And it does seem like, I don't think this Alabama thing is going to change anything. It's not going to change what anyone does, but it does seem like something is going to happen that is going to change things. And Ben, you might be right that at a certain point, a line will get crossed where it's not worth it for them just from a pure cost benefits analysis.
I mean, as I'm a pretty cynical person about the operations of American business, in particular as it comes to college sports. But I have to say, I was surprised. Like when I realized that college sports were part of the FanDuel, the gambling app world, I had kind of thought to myself, like, we're just blowing right into this. Like, it does seem like the kind of thing that even in the context of this being become,
we should have had some sort of national conversation about. I feel like I missed it. Like that there was gonna be at least like a few articles about there being a controversy before we did this. For all the reasons you describe. And I will note that the seminal film Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans depicts just such a scenario involving Josh's beloved LSU Tigers. A corrupt New Orleans police officer, I believe, lets a star defensive end.
I think that sounds right. It's a great movie. I haven't seen it in a while. But,
fantastic stuff.
We're getting American studies up in here.
Yeah, totally.
Lets him go, for a crime that he should have been arrested for, so that he can, blackmail him into betting and to throwing a game. And as with so many other things about that movie, we're seeing it.
The iguana.
Yeah.
Up next, more on Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, but also Bronny James to USC. Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the credit card created by Apple. It gives you unlimited daily cash back that you can now choose to grow in a high-yield savings account at 4.15% annual percentage yield. That's more than 10 times higher than the national average savings rate. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners, subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. National average savings rate is from FDIC website. Terms apply.
Hey, drag fans, please listen up.
I'm Alaska.
And my name is Willem.
And we are the hosts of Race
Chaser,
the premier and preeminent RuPaul's Drag Race recap podcast. And if you aren't listening to this podcasting behemoth yet, start right now.
Because it's 2023 and we have weekly coverage of the all-new episodes from the season 15 of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Every Wednesday, we will discuss, dissect, and disseminate all of the juiciest moments, wildest runway looks, and the shadiest reality TV twists of the best show on television, Drag Race.
Race Chaser with Alaska and Willem is the ultimate backstage pass for both drag obsessives and new fans alike. So don't wait. Find us on your podcast apps and listen.
Check out new episodes of Race Chaser every Wednesday and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you.
On Saturday, Bronny James posted a photo of himself in the USC Trojans locker room. He did that on Instagram. The caption, "Fight on," #committed. Thus ended maybe the most highly watched and highly mysterious recruiting saga in basketball history. Jack, given that Bronny is LeBron James's oldest son, his plans were always going to be highly scrutinized, but that only ramped up when his dad announced that he wanted to play with Bronny in the NBA, and also as Bronny's reputation as a prospect grew. So what do you think of his decision to stay in LA and to take a step that his dad never did, which is playing college basketball?
Yeah, as you mentioned, he's probably one of the most highly scrutinized high school athletes, certainly of this era. He has 7 million Instagram followers. He's been, the subject of multiple national ad campaigns while still in high school. So he's certainly someone like this is kind of uncharted territory in terms of the celebrity level of a high school athlete like this. There were some rumors earlier on that he was leaning towards doing the either G League Ignite or Overtime Elite route, which both of those are almost more like academy type programs for, to ramp people up straight into the NBA.
Maybe even going overseas, like what LaMelo Ball did.
or possibly going overseas, as LeBron sort of famously threatened to do. And instead he chose to go to college, and he chose USC. A lot of people earlier on in this process, the smart money was that he was going to choose Ohio State. You have to think that the choice to choose USC is in part driven by the marketing opportunities and the fact that he's already such a big celebrity. Just on the level of Bronny James himself, like I've long been kind of interested in him because he is someone who's been on people's radars for, basically probably as long as he's been conscious, just because he's LeBron's son and LeBron has talked about wanting to play with him. And he's a really interesting prospect. He's not a 5-star recruit. He's not a prodigy like LeBron was. He's not one of the top 10 or even top 20 players in his class, I don't think. But he also really seems to contradict, I think, a lot of people's preconceived stereotypes of what a son of a superstar billionaire athlete, the way that they would be. He's by all accounts he's not a prima donna at all. He's by all accounts a really, really good and sort of humble kid, really, really hard worker. These are all things people have said about him. Works really hard, really, really great defensive player, really selfless teammate. He's someone who other players love playing with, it seems like he's inherited LeBron's sort of, incredible basketball intelligence and work ethic and things like that. He hasn't inherited LeBron's physical gifts. He's only 6'3". LeBron was 6'8" when he came out of high school. He doesn't have the otherworldly athletic abilities that LeBron did. He kind of projects to more of like a, maybe defensive specialist role player, but people who have watched him play a lot think that he absolutely has a real future, both in college and in the pros, as being a really high level role player type guy. And like, that's certainly something that every NBA team needs.
Yeah, and I will say, I as someone who had not watched Bronny James's highlights before this segment, I went in and watched like about 20 minutes of Bronny James. I had been led to believe that this guy would be I don't know, making fundamentally sound layups or something. Just so our listeners know, he can dunk.
Yes. He's like a great athlete.
Yeah,
he's just not a LeBron
athlete.
athlete.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like as you know, as a person who watches college basketball, like I he is going to be more athletic than most college basketball players. Just to be clear, like he can dunk in traffic, and he's got a really nice looking shot. So I think you're right that like he doesn't have that kind of like John Wall mixtape like athleticism, insane jumping off the screen athleticism. But like he's definitely a very solid player. Like any college basketball fan watching those highlights would probably think, like I want that guy on my team. Which will, I'm just as an observer, a pretty casual observer of the college level, like it'll be fun to have him and Collier on the same team. Like I think that, as we've talked about, and a lot of people observed during March Madness, like part of the reason the air has gone out of college basketball is not necessarily that the play is that much worse. I mean, there's still good players in college, but just that like there's not much narrative momentum going into each season or even going into the tournament. Like everything just kind of gets built out of thin air once the tournament starts, and it's fun. Like it's still fun to watch the tournament. But it'll be like, it's kind of exciting. Like, okay, we're actually going to have like kind of a national college basketball team next year in USC.
The USC part of it is fascinating because when we talk about young people who are not entitled, USC is probably not number one on the list of given what we know from the Varsity Blues scandal. But there is this kind of, before I get into the history, Juju Watkins, who's the number one ranked high school girl player who goes to Sierra Canyon like Bronny does, also going to USC. And they're both Nike athletes, and USC is a Nike school. And with the NIL thing, Bronny is an example of somebody who is not going to college to get NIL opportunities. He's somebody who's going to college now safe in the knowledge that his existing money will not be taken away. Sort of like an Olympic athlete or something, like somebody who has made a ton of money and has all this kind of outside income, but will actually be eligible to play in college now. And there's also a history there of Reggie Bush and OJ Mayo, of athletes who got in a lot of trouble at USC for taking advantage of opportunities that would now be a reason to go to college, or would now be fully okay if you did go to college. And the OJ Mayo thing is what instantly came to mind for me. He was in the mid 2000s, 2006, 2007. I mean, he's only like a micro generation younger than LeBron, but like looking back, he's touted in these articles as the best high school prospect since LeBron James. And he had maybe the most bizarre recruitment story ever, which is that he announced he was going to USC without the USC coaches knowing he was interested in going there or having made any effort to recruit him. And he looked to USC, I think rightly, as essentially an empty vessel that he could pour himself into, that it didn't have, I mean, it's funny to say baggage. It's not UCLA, where if you go there and are great, you'll be maybe the 10th best player to ever play at UCLA. And maybe if you win a championship, it'll be like maybe remembered in the 10th line of the USC basketball history after like everything great that John Wooden did. Whereas if you go to USC, you have all the marketing opportunities, you have LA, and you have an opportunity to put your stamp on the program. And so, Jack, Bronny seems to understand that, he's a smart guy. His family has a lot of basketball acumen. He knows he's not going to be the best player on this team, which is different than OJ Mayo. I think he went there knowing he would be the star and would get everything run through him, and he was then taken number 3 in the NBA draft. But Bronny goes there knowing he'll probably come off the bench. He's not even close to being the best freshman who'll be on the team. There's a guy, Boogie Ellis, who's a star, who's a guard, who's going to, take most of the possessions. And it's just an interesting choice. You're going to a school with not a lot of tradition. He wants to stay in LA. He'll get the marketing opportunities. But especially if he's only there for 1 year, he's not necessarily going to get the chance to really be a star on the floor. Like, I think what people are anticipating is that the best case scenario is he'll play a good amount and he'll be a low usage, glue guy on a team that does well.
Yeah, I think that's probably a realistic expectation. It seems unlikely that he's going to come in and be a star. Certainly not from the beginning. And I don't know. He might end up staying more than 1 year. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I think everything.
If he comes out after his first year, Jack, LeBron will be 40 when he's in the league. So if he comes out after his second year, you can add LeBron, 1 to that number.
I don't know how much. LeBron seems to have plenty left in the tank. So I don't know. Yeah. But this is definitely something too that people say about Bronny is that he's shown really, really consistent improvement. Part of that is, as I mentioned, he supposedly just has this really fantastic work ethic and is really someone who, works on every aspect of his game. And this is something that I've heard analysts and stuff talk about him. And they're like, it doesn't really come through if you look at his high school numbers because he's had this kind of unusual high school career playing at Sierra Canyon, which is a real powerhouse basketball school where a lot of highly touted players have played. But they're like, if you actually watch him, he's just gotten so much better, year to year to year. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that this is something that he's still very much developing. And maybe I think he'll probably come out after his freshman year and probably get drafted. I think if he plays well his freshman year, I would guess that he'll get drafted in the first round, probably not near the top of the first round, but maybe in the second half or second round or something like that. Obviously, it's LeBron's still playing at such a high level that, drafting LeBron's kid is something, there's some strategic reasons to do that if you're an NBA team. And, I don't think LeBron's looking to retire anytime soon. And he has said that, this is really important to him as the opportunity to play with his son. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this develops and what happens next year.
I think one reason he's probably going there is just fun, right? It's, and I think that's, I think that's a positive development for not just the game of college basketball, for the game of basketball itself, because there are players in this era, who kind of passed through their entire life as basketball players without really ever getting to enjoy the buzz and the joy of being a really good basketball player. If you think about it, they start as maybe really high level 8th grade prospects. They go to one of these basketball academies that we've been talking about, like Sierra Canyon, Montverde is another, Oak Hill, IMG. Mm-hmm. They might not even be starters at these places because there are so many other talented prospects. So you're playing kind of a role at a super high, level high school, but it's not the same as obviously being a star in a big public high school in a big city or in any part of any other part of the country. They might go to 1 year at a top college program. They might not start. They might go to the G League and not be on TV at all. And then they might go to the pros, and once you're in the NBA, maybe you don't ever play, And so I think the player empowerment era and overall has been a great thing for athletes, of course, and they're getting compensated and they're getting treated like professionals. But at the same time, I feel I have some sympathy for some of these guys who just go through their entire careers now in this kind of academy setting and never really get to have the fun of he's going to be playing in a really big nationally televised game against UCLA, twice next year and probably some other really big games. And I think that's great for him. It's great for me as a fan, and it's good for the sport. And so I'm glad that hopefully one of the things that NIL has done is been able to draw some of that buzz back, because ultimately, I think that's what part of what sports are about and should be about for the athletes as well as for the fans, is just being part of these enormous moments. And so I'm glad that some of these guys are going to get to be able to enjoy that.
And it's going to be a time for him to develop his own profile and to do it in a way that's kind of unmanaged and unscripted. I didn't realize until reading some of these stories that he had not done any interviews during his senior year, that his representatives kind of shut down when he was in, when there was some press availability, shut down questions about his recruitment. I believe there were cameras following him around for kind of documentaries that were being made in-house by, his father's people. But, he has this profile that in some sense he's been, like you said, Jack, a public figure since he was born. He has this social media presence. He had a lot of pressure put on him by his dad saying that, he was going to play with him in the NBA. LeBron kind of walked that back a little bit around the news of the USC commitment, saying that, his son has his own dreams and he'll support him no matter what. But it has been this kind of a little bit of a zigzag where he's been in the public eye. They've been trying to maybe keep him away and shield him a little bit while there's a lot of pressure on him. But no, he can do whatever he wants. But this is going to be the first opportunity for him to be kind of scrutinized, to have cameras following him where we're watching him live in real time, doing things, making decisions on the court and off. And, it's both an opportunity, but also I can imagine, and this is the same for any athlete at his level, but also just magnified 100 times based on his name. It's just there is going to be pressure. There's no way to avoid, if you're going to be an athlete at this level, that there's going to be pressure, but it's all going to be kind of coming down on him at once in a way that it hasn't before. It'll be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I do think another just interesting wrinkle with Bronny is thinking about him in terms of thinking back on LeBron's, path from high school to the NBA, where LeBron, back in 2002, 2003 was the most, scrutinized, fussed over, whatever term you want to use, high school basketball player, certainly of his generation. And I think there's elements of that process that LeBron, I think, probably still feels pretty burned by. There was a lot of kind of mistreatment of him. He was exposed to a microscope that was really unfair, and some of that stuff feels really gross looking back on it. I'm thinking
there was a controversy about how he got a car and how he got
throwback jerseys.
Jerseys,
yeah. He got suspended from his high school team for wearing a throwback jersey that was $300, and that was deemed so offensive to some people. And there was just a lot of stuff swirling around then that I think he probably still remembers. And I think, to his credit, I think his family has tried to shield Bronny from some of that exposure and some of that, the harshness of that particular type of spotlight.
And now it is time for Afterball, sponsored by Bennett's Prune Juice, endorsed by Kenny Sailors, who says it was okay. I mentioned O.J. Mayo in our previous segments. He received numerous gifts in violation of NCAA rules, according to Wikipedia, which led to games being vacated, as the NCAA likes to do. Went on to be the number 3 pick in the NBA draft, had a long, if not as distinguished NBA career as I think he would have hoped for. I did not realize that he was banned from the NBA in 2016 for violating the league's anti-drug program. I also didn't realize that he is currently still playing. He is playing for Zamalek SC of the Egyptian Basketball Super League. So that is where O.J. Mayo is currently.
Josh, what is your Zamalek SC?
Thank you, Jack. If you watched the Sixers-Celtics game on Sunday, you heard the story of James Harden's relationship with John Howe. The 20-year-old Howe was paralyzed from the chest down in the mass shooting at Michigan State University in February, in which 8 people were shot and 3 were killed by a man with 2 9mm handguns. Harden befriended Howe when he learned that he was a fan and invited him to go to a game as soon as he was well enough to travel. That happened this weekend after Howe left a Chicago rehab facility, and he was there in Philly with his family wearing a James Harden jersey. And after Harden hit the game winner, he gave Howe his shoes on the court. It was a heartwarming moment, and what would be even more heartwarming is if gun violence wasn't so prevalent that it generated story after story that intersected with sports and every other realm of society. A couple of weeks ago, Matthew Delaney, a baseball player at Texas A&M Texarkana, was just standing around the bullpen during a game when he was struck with a stray bullet. Here is the latest update on him from a GoFundMe page that's been set up by a family friend. Today was a good day. He had a great PT session. They're planning to take his chest tube out tomorrow. We should be released soon to go to inpatient neurotherapy in downtown Dallas Baylor. Please continue praying for Matthew's full recovery. Jack, unfortunately, you have some personal experience you can offer here. Back in November, a UVA student opened fire on a chartered bus during a school field trip, killing 3 people and injuring another 2. One of the survivors, UVA running back Mike Hollins, just returned to the football field during the Cavaliers spring game. The 3 young men who were killed, Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry, and Lavelle Davis Jr., were also members of the football team, and Chandler and Davis were your students, Jack. You wrote beautifully about them back in November. It's hard to imagine that was actually 6 months ago now. So can you just tell us a little bit about them and what UVA and the world are missing with them gone?
Yeah, I've been thinking about Lavelle and Devin a lot since the tragedy, but also recently because graduation's coming up. And it's, one of those times of year when you tend to get sort of nostalgic and think back on things. I had Devin in a class in spring of 2022, so a year ago. It was actually his first semester at UVA. He'd transferred from the University of Wisconsin, and he was getting acclimated to just being at a new university. And he used to come to my office hours a lot because he just had, he didn't know how the computer system worked. He didn't know how to find anything. And he was just such a great guy. My brother is an alum of the University of Wisconsin, and I told Devin that, and he immediately just lit up and said, "What's his name?" Not putting together that my brother graduated. Probably, I think my brother graduated college in 2007. They didn't know each other, but he was just such an incredibly warm, and really magnetic guy, and just was a real pleasure to have in class, someone who his classmates just really loved. He was also an American Studies major, so I, know a lot of his classmates, both in my class and other classes that he took, and just everyone loved him. Lavelle I had in class this past fall, so, he was actually in my class at the time of the shooting, and it was a relatively small class. Lavelle was 6'7", so he was a large presence in the class, even though he was fairly soft spoken, but he was also someone who was just, really, really universally liked by his classmates. I often saw him during and after class, going out of his way to make conversations with, other students in the class who non-athletes. And that's kind of unusual, like high level student athletes at like Division I programs, their lives are so sort of circumscribed by their practice schedules and all those things that it's hard for them, I think, a lot of times to really socialize with students who are outside of their programs, outside of their teams. And it just, Lavelle seemed to have such an interest in doing that, and sort of seeking out those connections, getting to know his classmates, who, came from all sorts of different walks of life and things like that. And it was just like, it was such a stunning loss. And as you mentioned, it was so, thinking back to those days and everything afterwards was so confusing and awful and terrible. But there was this sort of sickening sense of like, God, like this has finally come to the place where I am, this epidemic of mass shootings and gun violence. And there was, it's sports related, these were athletes, but they were so much more than that. At the end of the day, they're just like, they were people, they were great young people with these incredible futures ahead of them. I didn't know Deshaun Perry, but I heard that he was just incredible kid as well. He was a studio art major, apparently a really, really talented artist. And it's just, the loss is still just kind of, you can't put it into words. They should still be here, and they deserve to be remembered as much more than football players. And it remains really enraging and sad to me that they're gone.
Thank you for sharing that. And the thing that's so upsetting and disheartening is that there's just no indication that it's going to stop. Like,
yeah, it keeps happening. I mean, it's really like, I don't even want to get into everything, but it keeps happening. So.
And Jack, as you're saying, you're approaching graduation. What is the mood on campus now? I mean, are people talking about them? Like, are people talking about the incident as we come to this time of year when, as you say, it's like an occasion to reflect on the past? Is that something that's still being, what's the stage of reckoning with that's taking place at UVA?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still obviously really, really present, and I'm sure it's something that's going to be acknowledged at, graduation ceremonies across the college. I mean, I think it's really complicated because I think, most people want graduation to be, everyone imagines their graduation being a celebratory, really happy time where, they're celebrating with friends and family and, you're sort of saying goodbye to all your good memories from college. But yeah, the students in this graduating class are going to carry with them that this was something that happened during their senior year of college, and that these are, Lavelle and Devin were not graduating in 2023. They would have been, I think, class of 2024 for both of them. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely something that, it'll be, it's going to be a challenge to see how the university addresses it. And, I think it's still going to be an ongoing challenge emotionally for students and faculty in terms of how to reconcile their feelings. There's still unresolved feelings. I think there's still painful feelings about what happened in November versus the happier feelings that, graduation usually provokes.
That is our show for today. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. To listen to past shows and subscribe or just reach out, go to slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. And please subscribe to the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Thank you, Jack Hamilton. Thank you, Ben Mathis-Lilley. I am Josh Levin. Remember Zelmo Beatty and Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry, and Lavelle Davis Jr. And thanks for listening.
Hey, drag fans, please listen up.
I'm Alaska.
And my name is Willem.
And we are the hosts of Race
Chaser,
the premier and preeminent RuPaul's Drag Race recap podcast. And if you aren't listening to this podcasting behemoth yet, start right now.
Because it's 2023 and we have weekly coverage of the all-new episodes from the season 15 of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Every Wednesday, we will discuss, dissect, and disseminate all of the juiciest moments, wildest runway looks, and the shadiest reality TV twists of the best show on television, Drag Race.
Race Chaser with Alaska and Willem is the ultimate backstage pass for both drag obsessives and new fans alike. So don't wait. Find us on your podcast apps and listen.
Check out new episodes of Race Chaser every Wednesday and Friday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs. Vic said something. Music.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.